Hello everyone, my name is Carl. I am a full 15 years old. My father is the president of a very large company in the United States. Our family is billionaires, but I work as a waiter. Do you want to know why? Now I'll tell you everything, and while you listen, watch and do not forget to immediately subscribe to this channel. Let's start with the fact that when I was born, we were poor. Yes, it is hard to believe. Now it is customary to think that if you are poor, you will never achieve anything. But my father is the best example of what it is possible to earn yourself, and he did it. When he and my mother got married, they had nothing, no place to live, no car. And the day came when it was necessary to pay the bills, including paying for the apartment. There was nothing. My mother had a little me, she could not go to work. Then my father, desperate, went out on the street and just went to shops and cafes, offering the services of a cleaner, a salesman, yes, anyone. He did not disdain work, and his mother respected him for it. That day he came back late at night, but managed to earn money, and although Dad was terribly tired, he always found time to play with me. So they lived for several years, until one day, Dad came as a cleaner in a large company. He was mopping the floors after the directors' meeting. One of the men kicked Dad's mop and called him a laborer. My father was a proud man, but with a brain. He could have hit him hard, but he knew he had a family to feed, so he straightened up and said something to the man that the others didn't even comment on. Dad told that man that the project they were working on would fail just because its concept was built wrong. They were going to build houses for the poor and sell them. Dad himself lived in such conditions and knew perfectly well what amenities were really needed. The guy just laughed and said he wasn't going to listen to the janitor's opinion. The idea of the project is beautiful, Gillies, that it is led by a person who does not understand and is not educated, my father said. He turned on Dad. He was hurt in front of his supervisor, and that offended him the most. Then the most important director intervened. He reassured his subordinate, then turned to his father. He asked him a couple of questions, and Dad answered. He just said his opinion and gave a couple of free tips. The director asked why my father worked as a cleaner if he was good at business. Then Dad said that a real businessman does not disdain any dirty work. It's hard to believe, but my father was put on probation after the dialogue. That subordinate was angry. He was furious. The very next day, my father came to train. He immediately showed himself. The internship lasted 3 long months, but it was paid. This money was enough for a living. After a while, Dad was hired for a long and hard work. It was a holiday for our family. Over the years, my father rose higher and higher. I grew up, we already bought our own house, 2 cars, and my mother gave birth to another daughter, my sister. And then we just got rich, until my father started running the company himself, which he came to as a cleaner. Despite the money, connections, and position, Mariana and I, my little sister, were brought up simply, without being tied to money. If you need money, go to work, Dad would say. Of course, we didn't need anything. We ate, we went to great schools, we had everything. But if I needed my own money, my father sent me to work. So in the summer, I worked part-time with neighbors, and then with this money, my friends and I went camping or went to parties. It didn't bother me that I was working. However, many people around were outraged and considered my father's upbringing ruthless. He asked them to mind their own business. I didn't like working at first. At first, I just wanted to ask my mother for money. She gave it to me secretly, until my father noticed. He strictly forbade spoiling Mariana and me, and my little sister was offended with my father, and so was I. And once he came home earlier than usual, he sat me down at the table and said that there was an important conversation. Dad then explained that he could no longer support us and that everything we had would have to be sold. My mother almost had a heart attack. She was very worried, and only asked what to do now. My father replied that now it was time for me to help him. I also had to earn money. That day I could hardly sleep, because I could not believe that we were now poor. I suddenly remembered again that feeling when every cent counts, when it is necessary to save everything, wait for wages, and sometimes go to bed hungry. I felt sick. I saw my mother's condition, and felt sorry for her. And now we had Mariana, who had never understood what it meant to sleep on the floor in cheap apartments. I pulled myself together and made a plan of action. I understood that since I was a man, I had to take care of my family. My father did everything he could. I came to school, sat out classes, and then quickly ran to a cafe near the house and got a part-time job there. The receptionist was surprised. He didn't understand why I was working. I didn't want to explain for a long time. I just said that we needed money. He accepted me with no work experience and started the same day. It was hard. That night I came home exhausted, tired, and hungry. I ate quickly, did my homework, and went to bed. The next day, I was back at work after school. So 2 months have passed. I gave my entire salary to my parents and kept a small part for myself. My father and mother were proud of me, and I knew I was doing the right thing. Christmas was coming. I studied well, and so I finished my studies before the winter break with good results. Christmas morning began with unexpected surprises. Mom and Dad came into my room and handed me a gift box. There were car keys. I did not immediately understand what this means, and Dad said, "You deserve a gift. Now I see that you are my son and a worthy man." I didn't know what was going on. Then my parents took me outside, where a car was waiting for me. In all the excitement, I almost choked. I bombarded my parents with questions about where the money came from, and when we went home, Dad admitted that he had invented the bankruptcy situation. I wondered why, and then my father said his favorite phrase, "A real businessman does not disdain dirty work." At that moment, I was filled with a sense of joy and pride in myself at the same time. I didn't let the family down. It was important. I accepted the gift, and my father said that I could quit my job for the duration of my studies. But I was so used to making money that I said I'd work for a while. Another year has passed since then. I still work in that cafe as a waiter, and I like my job. People around me no longer laugh at me. They show respect. Now I go to work by car, and I divide my salary for the needs of my home and family. I think I'm doing everything right. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments, and do not forget to put likes.
Hi everyone, my name is Arya. My childhood was not like a normal one. I did not play like all the children in the yard with each other. I went to a hot summer camp. Did not go to a friend's house for a sleepover. Did not throw tantrums when I saw new toys. And all because my dad is an admiral. At home, we always had strict rules. It was just the three of us. Dad, Mom, and me. As you understand, my father was in charge of everything. And we lived according to his schedule, even when my mother was always at home. She didn't work, she didn't have any friends, and in the most extreme cases, she went to visit her only sister. My dad is very strict. He believes that discipline is the way to success. But he forgot that we are not soldiers. My mother is a housewife, and I am a schoolgirl. And what success could we talk about? Unquestioning obedience was his main demand, and it came first. My mother and I addressed him as you. He could not even speak, but only showed my mother with his eyes what he wanted. To eat, drink, serve him newspapers, turn on the TV, and so on. But we were lucky in some ways. He was often late at work. Sometimes he didn't come home for several days. These days, my mother and I had so much fun at home. We ate sweets, watched movies late, went to bed together. My mother read me stories loudly, not in whispers. We laughed, played, and danced. That's the side of life I love the most. You know, my mom is great. She fell in love with father and married him when he was very young. My mother often remembered what my father was like when he was only a sergeant. I can't believe it, but from her words, there was no nicer person. She told me that my father ran after her, took care of her as best he could, loved her up to her ears, against the wishes of my grandmother, married my mother, and they had a daughter, me. My mother says that my father adored me. He always carried me in his arms. He spent the money he earned on toys, bought my mother things, jewelry. They did not need anything. And then, when my father was promoted to admiral, something started happening to him. He became withdrawn, service-mad, greedy, angry. I started coming home late and very nervous. And then I started having fun with my mom. I didn't tell her, but I often heard him beating her up. I could hear her crying all night in the bathroom, see the blood on her clothes, the bruises on her body. He hits her everywhere except in the face. So even in summer, my mother wears floor-length dresses or pants and a blouse or long-sleeved shirt on top. Personally, I couldn't remember my father playing with me. I remember him as he is now, sullen, fear-inducing. I knew that my mother's memories of him were completely different, but it didn't help at all to bring back the old man, the sergeant. Once I even suggested that my mother and I run away together, but she was intimidated. I don't know what Father told her, but it obviously worked. She dreaded the thought of leaving. "If I leave, he will find me, and then," my mother always said, but she never finished the sentence. I could feel her anxiety and self-doubt, but I had to do something about it. I had to help her and myself, because I didn't have the strength to live in such a nightmare anymore. I decided to talk to her again and again, again and again. It must have lasted more than a week. Every day I started talking about how living with a tyrant is the worst fate, that leaving doesn't mean disgracing yourself, but saving yourself. My mother was crying. I saw how she wanted to leave and couldn't. She was scared, but not me. I packed my bags, put everything I needed in there, money, documents, took them out into the corridor, and ran after my mother. I persuaded her to get up and go out the door. The main thing is to start. She went down the stairs and froze. My father was standing in the doorway. He looked at the bag, silently kicked it to the side, motioned for my mother to go to the bedroom, and told me to go to the kitchen. I was sitting on the ground floor behind the kitchen table and heard from the bedroom my mom's sobs and falling furniture. In all my years, I have clearly distinguished the sound of how my father punches my mother in the head, kicks her in the stomach, legs, hands, hits her head on the wall. She tried not to scream so as not to frighten me, but it didn't frighten me. I was used to it. And over time, she became angry. I picked up a knife from the kitchen and went upstairs to find my father yelling at her. He shouted that she would never leave him, and if she did, he would find us, take the child from her, and grind her to powder. My mother begged him to forgive her. She took it upon herself to try to escape. I stood and watched him. A monster. This is not a person. When he grabbed my mother by the throat and started choking her, I ran up behind him and stabbed him. I hit him in the shoulder. He screamed, more out of surprise, I think. Then he swung to hit me. But at that moment, my mother hit him on the head with a vase, and he lost consciousness. She was shaking with fear. We ran downstairs, grabbed our bags, and started running. We understood that my father had very strong connections in law enforcement, and most likely, when he wakes up, he will connect everyone to find us, so we didn't have much time. First of all, we arrived at the train station, bought tickets, and hid in the train compartment. Only there my mother relaxed a little, wiped the blood away, and then hugged me tightly and began to cry. Surprisingly, I wasn't afraid. In a way, I was glad that we had finally escaped from this tyrant. Since then, we've been wandering from city to city. Thank God I knew where the money was stored in the house, so I took everything. This was enough for us to change our image a little, make new documents, rent a house, and eat. Very soon, my mother and I plan to go far away and start life anew. Today is my mother's birthday. I gave her a handmade cake. My mother cried a lot, and then said that I had already given her 2 valuable gifts, myself and freedom. It was nice. I've learned that sometimes adults just need a little determination to make their dreams come true. It's been almost a year since we ran away. Oddly enough, we moved quietly from city to city. We didn't feel any danger or anxiety. We lived as if it had always been so. Who knows? Maybe he finally let us go?